He thought I'd be too weak to leave after his affair, so I gave him a reason to hate me instead. I stayed, but I didn't stay faithful. One day, he found a note in my purse, a love letter, but not from him. His hands shook as he read it. "Who is this from?" he whispered. I met his eyes and smiled. "The man who helped me forget you." His breath hitched. You did this on purpose." I smirked, "Just like you did." And that's when he finally felt the pain he had inflicted on me. I never imagined I'd be sharing this, but here I am. Maybe writing it down will help me process everything. I'm Sarah, 38, and I've been married to Mike, 40, for 12 years. We live in Chicago, in a modest house we bought together after our wedding. Our life was routine, both working decent jobs, no kids, a couple of dogs, and a comfortable rhythm. Or so I thought. About a year ago, things started to feel off. Mike began coming home later than usual, citing increased workloads. He became glued to his phone, often smiling at messages he wouldn't share. Our conversations grew superficial, and our intimacy dwindled. I attributed it to stress. After all, we were both in our late 30s, and careers can be demanding. I trusted him. I had no reason not to. One evening, while Mike was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it, not intending to snoop, but the message preview caught my eye. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." My heart sank. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I spent the next few days in a haze, observing him, looking for signs I might have missed. The late nights, the secrecy, the emotional distance, it all added up. I felt like a fool. One night, I decided to follow him after he claimed he was heading to the office for a late meeting. My hands trembled as I tailed his car through the city streets. He didn't go to his office. Instead, he parked outside a cozy little restaurant in Lincoln Park. From a distance, I watched as a woman approached him, and they embraced before heading inside. The sight made me nauseous. I confronted Mike that night. He didn't deny it. Said her name was Jessica, a colleague. "It just happened," he claimed. He was sorry. "Didn't mean to hurt me. Blah, blah, blah." The usual script. I was shattered. But here's the thing. I couldn't bring myself to leave. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was love, or maybe I just wasn't ready to upend my entire life. So, I stayed. But something inside me changed. A few months later, I met Daniel. He was a friend of a friend, someone I'd known casually for years. We reconnected at a mutual friend's party. He was kind, attentive, and, most importantly, he saw me. Really saw me. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I was in the throes of an affair. With Daniel, I felt alive again. The laughter, the passion, the connection, it was everything I'd been missing. I knew it was wrong, but I justified it by reminding myself of Mike's betrayal. An eye for an eye, right? One evening, after a rendezvous with Daniel, I carelessly left my purse on the kitchen counter. Mike was already home, sitting in the living room, engrossed in some TV show. I went to take a shower, completely forgetting about the note Daniel had slipped into my purse earlier that day, a heartfelt letter expressing his feelings for me. When I came out of the bathroom, Mike was standing in the bedroom doorway, holding the letter. His face was pale, hands trembling. "Who is this from?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I met his eyes, a mixture of fear and defiance bubbling within me. "The man who helped me forget you," I replied calmly. His breath hitched. You did this on purpose." I smirked, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction. "Just like you did." The room was thick with tension. For the first time, I saw pain in his eyes, the same pain I'd felt months ago. But instead of feeling guilty, I felt empowered. He thought I'd be too weak to leave after his affair. So, I gave him a reason to hate me instead. We stood there in silence, the weight of our mutual betrayals hanging between us. Finally, Mike spoke, his voice laced with defeat. "What do we do now?" I sighed, the reality of our crumbling marriage settling in. "I don't know, Mike. But we can't keep doing this." The days that followed were a blur of arguments, tears, and soul-searching. We tried counseling, but the trust was shattered beyond repair. In the end, we decided to part ways. The divorce was amicable, all things considered. We sold the house, split our assets, and went our separate paths. Looking back, I realized that two wrongs don't make a right. My affair didn't heal the wounds Mike's infidelity caused, it only deepened them. But it taught me a lot about myself, about resilience, and about the complexities of love and betrayal. Now, a year after our divorce, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life. I'm not proud of everything I've done, but I'm learning to forgive myself. And maybe, just maybe, I'll find love again this time, built on a foundation of trust and honesty. After that night, the one with the letter, I thought things between Mike and me would quietly fall apart. But I was wrong. That was just the beginning. A few days later, Mike came home drunk. That hadn't happened in years. He stumbled through the front door, his eyes red and glassy, slurring my name like it meant something. I sat at the kitchen table, silent, watching him crash into a chair across from me. "You ruined me," he said, dragging his hand down his face. "You and your little love letter." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him. He wanted to hurt me with words, but I had no energy left to care. "You think you're some kind of victim? You think that makes it okay?" "No," I said quietly. "But I stopped trying to be the good guy when you showed me how bad it can get." He slammed his fist on the table, making our dog bark from the other room. "You didn't have to sleep with him. And you didn't have to lie for a year." We sat in silence again. Just heavy breathing and the sound of a life coming apart. But the next day, things took a weird turn. Mike was gone when I woke up. His car was still in the driveway, but his keys and wallet were missing. I called his phone, no answer. He didn't come home that night. Then around 3 a.m., I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. "You should watch your back. You don't know what he's capable of." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I didn't sleep. I just kept replaying that message over and over. By morning, I was convinced it had to be Jessica, his mistress. Maybe she was jealous. Maybe she found out about Daniel. Maybe she was just crazy. I called Mike's brother. No, he hadn't heard from him. I debated calling the police, but what would I say? My husband is missing and possibly plotting revenge? By the third day, I was a wreck. Then Mike walked through the door like nothing happened. I jumped up, angry and relieved all at once. "Where the hell have you been?" He looked calm, too calm. Thinking. About what? Threatening messages? Ghosting me for 3 days? He raised an eyebrow. "You got a message?" I held up my phone. "This." He looked at it. No reaction. Then he smiled, a cold, slow, unfamiliar kind of smile. "Looks like Daniel's not the only one who can play games." I stared at him, ice crawling down my spine. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything illegal. But I might have had a conversation. A conversation with someone you should have thought twice about trusting." I stepped back, trying to piece it together. "You wanted Daniel?" "Not exactly. But I made sure he understands you're complicated." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mike was spiraling and dragging everyone with him. Later that day, Daniel texted me. "We need to talk. I'm out. I can't do this anymore." That's all it said. No call. No explanation. Just gone. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I knew then Mike had done something. Maybe he lied to him. Maybe he threatened him. I didn't know. But I could feel the shift. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about cheating anymore. It was about control. Mike started acting normal after that. Making breakfast. Talking like nothing had happened. But I wasn't fooled. Every word he said, every smile he gave, it was like he was waiting for me to crack. Then, a week later, I found something in the garage. A shoebox tucked under the tool bench. Inside were printouts. Emails. Texts. Photos. Screenshots of me and Daniel. My phone logs. My calendar. He'd been tracking me. I sat on the cold garage floor, shaking, realizing that all this time, Mike hadn't just been hurt, he'd been planning. When he got home, I confronted him. Held up the shoebox and threw it at his feet. "You've been watching me?" He didn't deny it. Just stared at me with those dead, unreadable eyes. "I had to know how far you'd go." You're insane. No, he said, calm as ever. I'm thorough. And then he walked past me, picked up the box, and said, You want out? Then go. But don't pretend you're the only one with secrets. I didn't even know what that meant. But now, I'm starting to believe I only know a fraction of who Mike really is and what he's capable of. And I have no idea what he's planning next. I didn't leave that night. Not because I was scared of him, though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, but because I needed to understand. I needed to figure out what secrets he was talking about. What else he was holding over me. What did he mean I wasn't the only one with secrets? The next morning, I went back to the garage. The box was gone. The rest of the day, he acted completely normal. He cooked eggs, asked me if I wanted to go for a walk, even commented on how beautiful the weather was. It felt fake. Like I was living in a play where everyone else had the script but me. Then I got a message. From Daniel. Only this time, it wasn't a breakup text. Meet me at the Wabash Bridge. 11 p.m. No one else. Bring the letter. I stared at it, trying to process what the hell he was talking about. The letter? The letter? The one Mike found? I thought he'd burned it. Or kept it. But apparently, he didn't. I went digging through my closet. There it was, stuffed into an old coat pocket. Crumpled but still legible. I didn't ask questions. I drove downtown and waited under the yellow streetlights, the hum of the city echoing around me. Daniel showed up 5 minutes late. He looked exhausted, thinner than I remembered, like he hadn't slept in days. What is going on? I asked. He glanced around, stepped closer. You need to listen to me. Mike didn't just come to me, Sarah. He threatened me. Told me he had something that would ruin you. Your job. Your life. He said you weren't who I thought you were. My stomach dropped. What did he mean? Daniel hesitated. He said you stole something. From your old job. And that he had proof. I blinked. What? That before you met him, you were fired. Not laid off. Fired. For embezzling. He said you changed your name. That you moved here to start over. I almost laughed. What the hell are you talking about? That's not true. Daniel's eyes searched mine. I believe you. But I also believe Mike's dangerous. He's not trying to win you back. He's trying to destroy you. My blood turned cold. I hadn't stolen anything. But there was something I never told Mike. 10 years ago, I worked at a nonprofit in Denver. It went under due to fraud committed by the CEO. But in the media chaos, a bunch of us got scapegoated. HR told me they had to let me go to restore trust. There were no charges, but my reputation got dragged through the mud. So I moved. Started over in Chicago. I never changed my name. I just stopped talking about it. Mike never asked. He never knew. Until now, apparently. I drove home, mind spinning. When I walked in, Mike was sitting at the kitchen table, the box in front of him again. Open. So, he said, tapping the edge of the table. You went to see him. You're digging into my past now? I snapped. I just wanted to know who you really are. I'm not the one who cheated first. I'm not the one who followed my spouse around like a stalker. I'm not the one making threats. Mike leaned forward. You're not the one lying? Hiding your past? Starting over like none of it ever happened. I didn't do anything wrong back then. I shouted. And you knew it. You just wanted leverage. He stood up slowly. I wanted to see what you'd do when the tables turned. And then, with a smirk, he dropped the next bomb. I talked to your boss, by the way. My heart stopped. What? Just asked about how reliable you've been lately. Mentioned that there might be questions about your background. No big deal. You're trying to get me fired? He shrugged. Just evening the playing field. This wasn't about love. Or even revenge. Mike wanted to erase me. And the worst part? I think he planned this from the moment I didn't leave. From the moment I stayed. He knew how to hit where it hurt. And now he was going after everything I had left. The thing is, Mike doesn't know everything either. There's one more secret. One I've kept buried. One that, if it ever came out, would flip all of this upside down. And if he keeps pushing me, he's going to find out exactly what I'm capable of. He had crossed the line. And now I had no choice but to cross it, too. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I'd kept quiet. Everything Mike thought he knew. Everything he didn't. The next morning, I got dressed like normal. I even made coffee, handed him a cup like we were still playing house. He took it without looking at me, like we hadn't torn each other down to the bone just the night before. Then I left the house and made one stop, Daniel's place. I told him everything. The truth about Denver. The truth about what Mike was doing. The truth about what I had. "Sarah, what are you going to do?" he asked. "I'm going to make him stop." I still had the old hard drive from the nonprofit in Denver. I kept it, not for any shady reason, but because it held old resumes, tax documents, and a few internal emails I thought might clear my name someday. Emails that could now prove Mike was lying if he tried to destroy my reputation. And I had something else. Months ago, during one of Mike's many late-night absences, I found an SD card in his sock drawer. It was labeled J. I assumed it was something to do with Jessica and never had the heart to open it until now. When I plugged it into my laptop, I found photos. Not just of Jessica, but of Mike with multiple women. Bars, hotel rooms, selfies. Dated over years. Even before Jessica. He hadn't cheated once. He'd made a lifestyle of it. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. And somewhere between anger and disbelief, I felt calm. So I printed them all. The emails. The photos. Everything. Then I waited. The company Mike worked for hosted a corporate dinner that weekend, spouses invited. It was in a big ballroom at a downtown hotel. The kind of event with name tags and handshakes and wine glasses that cost more than the bottle. I wore red. Not to stand out. Just because I could. Mike didn't suspect a thing. He walked beside me all night like we were the perfect couple. Laughing, charming, introducing me to his coworkers as his amazing wife. That's when I knew how much of a lie he lived in. I waited until dessert. The lights dimmed slightly. The head of the company gave a small speech. People clapped. And then I stood up. "I'm so sorry," I said, loud enough for the table to hear. "I need to borrow the mic for just one moment." Mike turned his head so fast I thought his neck might snap. "Sarah, what are you doing?" The host handed me the microphone, stunned. Go ahead?" I walked to the front of the room, looked out at dozens of faces I didn't know, and said the words I had waited months to say. "I just want to take a moment to recognize my husband, Mike, for being the most consistent liar I've ever met." A stunned silence. Mike's been cheating for years. Not just with Jessica, who I'm sure some of you know, but others too. I have the photos if anyone's interested. I held up the folder. People gasped. And when I confronted him, he decided to destroy my life. Called my boss. Threatened the man I was seeing. Told lies about my past because he couldn't stand that someone hurt him the way he's hurt people for years. I turned to him. He was pale. Frozen. "I stayed with you after you cheated, Mike. I gave you a chance. But you didn't want redemption. You wanted control." A woman at one of the front tables muttered, "Jesus Christ," under her breath. Someone else dropped their fork. Mike stood up slowly. "Sarah, that's enough." "No, it's not," I snapped. "You wanted to ruin me. And now, here we are." He didn't speak. He just walked out of the room, his back stiff, his steps uneven. I stood there a moment longer, then handed the mic back to the stunned host and said, "Enjoy the cheesecake." When I stepped outside, Mike was gone. Daniel texted me later that night. "Holy hell. Are you okay?" I texted back, "I will be." In the days after, Mike tried to call me. Once, I didn't answer. Then his brother reached out. Said Mike had gone quiet. That maybe I'd gone too far. Maybe I had. But I felt no guilt. No shame. Just a strange, heavy calm. Like a storm had passed and left behind nothing but silence. I didn't lose my job. My boss knew about the nonprofit scandal years ago and never held it against me. I had just never told Mike. Daniel and I. We didn't make it. Too much damage. Too much left unsaid. But I don't regret it. What I regret is staying silent for so long. Letting someone rewrite the story of who I am just because they were afraid to face what they'd done. I don't know what's next. I don't have a perfect plan. But I know who I am now. And I'm not hiding. I'm not the woman who got cheated on. I'm not the woman who cheated back. I'm the woman who decided enough was enough. And that's where I'll start.